Have you ever gone somewhere to relax, only to realize later that you were trapped with the wrong person? The kind of person who smiles at you one moment and makes your skin crawl the next. A few years ago, my girlfriend Stacy and I were exhausted from life. Work stress, bills, non-stop noise, and the feeling that every day was exactly the same. We wanted silence. We wanted peace. So Stacy suggested renting a lonely cabin deep in the woods for a weekend getaway. Just us, snow falling outside, a fireplace, and no people around for miles. At first it sounded perfect. But looking back now, I wish we had never gone there at all. Money was tight for both of us, so we invited my best friend Randy and his girlfriend to split the cost. Randy immediately agreed, and for a while everything felt exciting. We planned food, games, drinks, and cozy nights around the fireplace. But less than a week before the trip, Randy suddenly broke up with his girlfriend. The breakup was ugly, and Stacy and I figured the trip was probably cancelled. Then Randy called and told us not to worry. He still wanted us to go. The next day, though, he dropped a surprise on us. He said he found somebody new to bring with him. Neither Stacy nor I liked that idea. Being stuck in the woods with a stranger already felt uncomfortable. But Randy begged us to trust him. He promised she was nice. He promised the trip would still be fun. Eventually we gave in, and that was our first mistake. The drive to the cabin felt awkward from the start. Randy introduced us to his new girlfriend Lucy, and something about her immediately felt off. She wasn't rude. She wasn't creepy. She was just, strangely quiet. Stacy and I tried making conversation the entire drive, but Lucy barely answered anything. Sometimes she would stare out the window for several minutes without speaking at all. The deeper we drove into the snowy mountains, the quieter the atmosphere became inside the truck. By the time we finally reached the cabin, I realized I barely even knew what Lucy's voice sounded like. At first the weekend seemed normal. We unpacked our things, started a fire, cooked food, and tried relaxing. Later that night, Stacy suggested playing Uno beside the fireplace because it was one of our favorite games. For the first time all night, Lucy actually seemed more comfortable. She even smiled a little. But halfway through the game, everything changed instantly. Stacy called Uno after getting down to one card, and Lucy suddenly exploded. She accused Stacy of cheating and started screaming so loudly that it shocked all of us. Her face twisted with anger. She slammed her cards onto the table and kept yelling over and over again. At first we honestly thought she was joking. But she wasn't joking at all. It felt like watching someone completely lose control over a simple card game. A few hours later, Lucy acted completely normal again. That honestly scared me more than the screaming. During dinner she suddenly started sharing extremely personal details about her relationship with Randy. Things nobody should ever say in front of strangers. Randy looked embarrassed the entire time while Stacy and I awkwardly tried changing the subject. Eventually the cabin became quiet again, but the mood had changed. The comfortable vacation feeling was gone. It felt like everyone was pretending things were okay while secretly waiting for something bad to happen. That night, Stacy woke me up sometime after midnight and whispered for me to listen carefully. Through the walls we could hear Randy and Lucy arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were low, but the anger behind them was obvious. We couldn't understand the words, only the tension. Eventually the fighting stopped, and the cabin fell silent again. The next day felt strange. Randy barely spoke to us, and Lucy stayed mostly hidden in the bedroom. The snowy woods outside suddenly didn't feel peaceful anymore. They felt isolating. Like we were trapped far away from help with somebody we didn't truly understand. Late that night, I woke suddenly to someone standing beside my bed. I nearly screamed before realizing it was Randy. But the look on his face terrified me immediately. He looked pale and shaken. Quietly, He asked if he could stay in our room and lock the door. Then he explained what happened. He said he woke up and found Lucy standing silently at the foot of the bed watching him sleep. When he asked what she was doing, she calmly replied, "Watching you, just in case." Then she slowly walked out of the room. Randy waited several minutes before getting up to look for her. That's when he discovered a large knife hidden on her side of the bed. Randy quietly searched the cabin for Lucy. He told us he found her wandering through the dark living room humming softly to herself. He said she moved slowly through the shadows almost like she was sleepwalking. Then the floor creaked beneath Randy's foot. Lucy instantly stopped humming. Without fully turning toward him, she whispered, "I see you." Randy said her voice didn't sound normal anymore. He ran straight to our room after that. While we sat there trying to figure out what to do, we suddenly heard the cabin's front door slam shut. We opened our bedroom door carefully and realized Lucy was gone. Randy looked outside and saw Lucy walking barefoot into the freezing forest wearing only shorts and a thin shirt. Snow covered the ground, but she kept walking deeper between the trees without stopping. Then Randy checked the bedroom again and realized the knife was missing. Panic spread through the cabin instantly. Stacy wanted to go outside and help Lucy, thinking maybe she was sleepwalking. Randy begged us not to. Before we could decide what to do, we suddenly heard the cabin door open again. Then slow footsteps moved down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Lucy had returned. And the entire time, she was still softly humming to herself. None of us slept that night. Early the next morning, we found Lucy calmly washing dishes in the kitchen like absolutely nothing had happened. Randy secretly showed me the knife hidden inside her bag before we left the cabin. The drive home was painfully silent. After that weekend, Randy completely disappeared from Lucy's life. But the strangest part came later. Stacy spent years searching for Lucy online and found almost nothing. No social media. No old photos. No records. It was almost like she never existed at all. And honestly, that's the part that still scares me the most. Because if Lucy wasn't even using her real name, then who exactly did we spend that weekend trapped in the woods with? Have you ever felt completely alone, and then suddenly realized you might not be alone after all? Not the normal kind of fear either. The kind that creeps into your chest slowly until every sound around you feels dangerous. A few years ago, I became obsessed with escaping people. My anxiety was horrible back then, and being around crowds exhausted me. So whenever I could afford it, I rented isolated cabins far away from cities and spent weekends completely alone. No noise. No traffic. Just woods, silence, and peace. At least, that's what I thought I was finding. One weekend, I rented a small cabin about 2 hours from home. The place sat deep in the woods with barely any nearby neighbors. Friday night felt normal. I cooked dinner, listened to music, and read beside the fireplace before going to sleep early. The next morning I decided to take a long hike through the forest trails nearby. Nature usually helped calm my mind. At first everything felt peaceful. Snow covered the ground, the air was cold and quiet, and the only sound was my boots crunching through the trail. Then I started hearing footsteps behind me. At first I convinced myself it was probably an animal. But the sounds didn't feel random. Every few seconds I heard branches snapping behind me like someone carefully following at a distance. Every time I stopped walking, the sound stopped too. I kept turning around expecting to see another hiker, but the woods were completely empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was watching me from somewhere between the trees. Eventually the paranoia became too much, and I cut the hike short to head back to the cabin. That evening, the anxiety from the hike still hadn't gone away. I tried distracting myself with music and a few drinks. Slowly I started relaxing again. Around 11 p.m., just as I was finally calming down, I heard knocking at the cabin door. At first it was soft. I turned the music off and listened carefully. Silence. I walked over and looked through the small windows built into the door, but nobody was there. I started walking away, and then the knocking came again, louder this time. This time when I looked outside, I saw a man standing near the porch. I switched on the outdoor light and immediately felt uncomfortable. The man looked completely out of place. He wore a dark suit, neatly combed hair, and looked more like a businessman than someone wandering through the woods at night. Through the closed door, I asked if he was okay. There was this long strange pause before he answered. Then in a calm emotionless voice, he told me he had been driving with his girlfriend earlier when she disappeared somewhere nearby. He claimed he'd been searching for hours and asked if he could come inside to call for help. Something about him felt deeply wrong. It wasn't just the situation. It was his voice. A normal person would sound panicked or desperate after losing someone in the woods. But this man sounded completely empty inside. I told him I would call the police for him, but he needed to stay outside. He slowly looked over his shoulder into the darkness behind him and quietly said, "I really need to come inside. Something is out here." Hearing those words in that empty voice sent chills through my entire body. I refused again and stepped away from the door to grab my phone. That's when the man suddenly changed. He started pounding on the cabin door violently. The walls shook with every hit. I ran back toward the entrance yelling at him to stop. Then suddenly the pounding stopped completely. Silence filled the cabin again. I carefully looked through the window, and nearly fell backward in shock. The man's face was pressed directly against the glass only inches away from mine. And then he smiled. In a calm voice, the man quietly laughed and said, "Come on, Victor, just open the door." My entire body froze. I had never told him my name. I know people say fear can make your mind race, but in that moment my brain completely shut down. I couldn't think straight. Somehow this stranger standing outside my isolated cabin already knew exactly who I was. The second I snapped out of it, I grabbed my phone and called 911. By the time police finally arrived, the stranger was gone. I spent nearly 15 minutes staring into the darkness outside the cabin waiting for help, but I never saw movement again. When the patrol officer arrived, I rushed outside and explained everything. The officer listened carefully but looked confused. Apparently nobody else nearby had reported seeing anyone strange. He suggested I stay in town for the night instead of remaining alone at the cabin. I agreed immediately. But while we walked toward my car, the officer suddenly stopped moving. All 4 of my tires had been slashed. The second I saw those tires, I realized something horrifying. That man never expected me to leave that cabin alive. The officer drove me into town that night, and my father helped recover my car the next morning. I never returned to that cabin again. Even now, years later, I still think about the man outside the door. About the way he spoke. About the way he smiled. But most of all, I think about how he knew my name before I ever opened the door. And sometimes late at night, I still wonder if he was ever truly lost at all, or if he came there looking specifically for me. Some places never really feel empty. Even when you know you're alone, something about them feels wrong. Like the walls are hiding secrets. About 6 months after my father passed away, I inherited his old cabin in the woods. We never had the best relationship, so being there felt strange from the beginning. I only planned on staying 1 weekend so I could clean the place up before selling it. I thought it would be a quiet goodbye to my father. Instead, it became one of the most terrifying nights of my life. The moment I stepped inside the cabin, the smell hit me. It smelled awful, like mold, rot, and something almost dead lingering in the air. My father hadn't stayed there in nearly a year before he died, so the place was filthy. But what really bothered me was how unchanged everything looked. The same furniture from my childhood. The same old couch. The same dusty shelves and decorations. Walking through the cabin felt like stepping backward in time. I spent most of the day cleaning downstairs. While I worked, I kept hearing strange sounds above me. Soft movement. Rustling noises. At first I ignored it, assuming animals had gotten into the attic. Eventually I remembered the small crawlspace attic above the hallway. It had one of those pull-down ladders attached to the ceiling. I climbed up expecting raccoons or squirrels. Instead I found piles of garbage scattered everywhere. Food wrappers, empty cans, old trash covering the floor. And somehow the smell upstairs was even worse. The attic made no sense to me. My father was messy sometimes, but not like this. It looked like somebody had actually been living up there. I cleaned for a while before finally giving up because the smell was unbearable. That night I slept in my father's old bedroom downstairs. Sometime after midnight, I woke up suddenly after hearing movement directly above me again. Slow footsteps. Rustling. Something shifting around in the attic. I tried convincing myself it had to be animals in the walls. But deep down, something about the noises felt human. Eventually I got out of bed and walked toward the hallway to check again. That's when I noticed something strange immediately. The attic ladder was already hanging down from the ceiling. I was almost certain I had closed it earlier before going to sleep. Then I noticed a fresh snack wrapper lying on the floor underneath the ladder. I picked up the wrapper angrily and walked into the kitchen to throw it away. Then I sat in the dark living room trying to calm myself down. A small lamp beside the couch cast this weak orange glow across the room. As I sat there thinking about my father, one question kept bothering me more and more. Why would he spend time hiding in that disgusting attic when the rest of the cabin was empty? The thought made absolutely no sense, until I looked across the room. Near the recliner sat what looked like a blanket draped over something large. At first I didn't think much of it. But then I remembered cleaning that exact corner earlier that day. Slowly I stood up and walked closer. And then I froze. A dirty boot was sticking out from underneath the blanket. For a few seconds my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then the blanket moved slightly. I stared at the blanket in complete silence. The longer I looked, the more obvious it became that somebody was underneath it. I could actually see the fabric rising and falling slowly from breathing. Every strange sound I heard earlier suddenly made sense. There were never animals inside the attic. A real person had been hiding in the cabin with me the entire time. Quietly watching. Quietly listening. Without making another sound, I slowly backed into the kitchen, grabbed my keys and phone, and sprinted outside. I jumped into my car and started reversing down the long driveway as fast as I could. Then I looked back toward the cabin one final time. A filthy-looking man suddenly burst through the front door. He looked thin, dirty, and wild, like somebody who hadn't lived around normal people in a very long time. But strangely, he didn't chase me. He just stood there watching my car disappear into the darkness. Police later told me the man was probably living inside the cabin for months while nobody visited the property. Judging by the smell and garbage upstairs, they believed he may have secretly stayed there for almost a year. The police never found him after that night. And I never stepped foot inside the cabin again. I hired people to clear everything out and sold the place exactly as it was. But sometimes I still think about how close that stranger was to me while I sat there believing I was completely alone. And honestly, that thought still terrifies me more than anything else.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe my channel. See you on next videos. Till then, goodbye.